Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Today's guest is Chris from the Phish Just Jams website and app. We all love Phish songs, but sometimes you just want to get straight to the jams, and that's what Chris and his brother Brian created. A database on a website and an app that allows fans to do just that. In addition to Just Jams, Chris is here to talk about the second set of an Out of Nowhere and In the Middle of Nowhere show. November 16th, 1996 at the Civic Auditorium in Omaha, Nebraska. 1996 has taken a little bit of a beating on this podcast and in general when it comes to Phish. We'll get into it deeper, but myself and many guests have referred to 1996 as an off year or as an in-between year when it comes to Phish's development. I've certainly realized the folly of that description, and according to Chris, it's this type of show that caused that type of generalization in the first place. While the second set is everything anyone could ever want in a Phish show, the first set is nothing remarkable. So in a time when it wasn't so easy to just pick and choose which part of a show you wanted to hear, anyone listening to this first set may incorrectly assume that there's nothing special about the show in general. And that's one major reason that we are reviewing just the second set of this 1996 show in Omaha. So let's join Chris to talk about Trey's percussion setup in 96, standing up during Kung, and turkey legs as we discuss the second set of Phish's performance from November 16th, 1996 at the Omaha Civic Auditorium. Chris from Just Jams, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. I'm so excited to have you on, not only for the show, or at least the set that you picked for today, but I genuinely want to take a moment before we even talk about anything about Omaha or November 96. I want to take a genuine opportunity to say thank you, because I'm a teacher, and a lot of people think that a teacher's job is just the 40 minutes in front of a bunch of students teaching them whatever is being taught. But like any other job, there's a lot of clerical work. There's a lot of paperwork to be filled out. There's not a lot of downtime, but stuff where you're not actively in front of people. And your website or your app, Phish Just Jams, has gotten me through so many hours of otherwise mindless, numbing, boring work that I have to say thank you straight up before we get into anything for not only the idea that you had, but that you've executed. And I'm sure it's brought joy to hundreds, if not thousands, of other Phish fans. So my genuine thanks for what you've done.
Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. That's definitely probably one of the best uses for it, is to kind of help kill some time as you're preparing for things or working or mindless tasks. So yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what it's for.
Well, before we get too deep into it, I want to tell the audience that today's set that Chris picked, and we'll get into why it's just one set, is the second set of November 16th, 1996 at the Civic Auditorium in Omaha, Nebraska, the one and only time Phish has played Omaha, though not the only time that they've played Nebraska. We'll get to the set and the music a little bit later, but it should be noted that Chris is one of the creators of Phish Just Jams. Chris, why don't you take a few minutes and inform anyone listening what Phish Just Jams is?
Phish Just Jams is essentially a database of jams that, as of now, has over 3,400 tracks, and that database can be filtered down to produce the particular playlist that you want at any time. You can change the years, the song, the tour. If you only want to hear stuff from fall tours, you can do that. It's broken down by location, by duration. So like if you really wanted to listen to only Yamar and Gumbo and Simple Jams from even years, you can do that. You can set it up like that. So that's what your playlist is. It's a fresh experience every time. If you went to the top and hit play and then turned off the shuffle, it would play through continuously for over a month before we get to repeat any tracks. So every time you visit, there's a fresh experience. So you get new set of jams every time you open up the app. And you can be as involved as you want to be, or you can just hit play and then just ignore it. So you can kind of go through and it can get you exactly what you want to listen to at any time.
And I kind of like that because as a fan, we've come to the complete opposite end of the spectrum from when I first got into Phish in the mid 90s, where you would take anything you could find, regardless of quality, regardless of first set or second set, whatever it took, you would get more live Phish, whatever you can get your hands on. Now, in 2022, it's the complete opposite end of things where Phish is almost disposable. You could get any jam, any song, any performance from any time, literally at the click of a few buttons on your phone in your pocket. So the fact that your site has all these different categories, all these different genres, all these different ways to sort what's available makes it so much easier for me because I'm the type of person who's paralyzed by choice. So when your Twitter feed, which you're very active on, when you share what you're listening to, says something like, I'm listening to this playlist of jams from Simple from 1996 to 1998, it makes me think something like, oh, I never in a million years would have thought to listen to just that. Let's give it a shot. And it makes things easier for me. Plus, your site is very easy to navigate.
Well, thank you. We have things like under the playlist filter, we have our mood playlists and our themed playlists. So you can have like if you're looking for just bliss jams, or if you're listening for dark evil jams, you can go and focus on just those. And you can also combine them. I like to combine, say, like the bliss and dark evil playlist together sometimes. And then we also have what we call our top shelf series, which we take all the years that we've covered, which is 93 till today. We choose the top, what we qualify as the top 25% of the jams from that year. So it can do two things. It's something that if you're not familiar with the year, you can go through and find out a bunch of jams that you didn't really know. It can also lead you to some full shows if you can look at the things and be like, oh, wow, there's 3 jams from this show. I'm definitely going to listen to that one. And if you already know all that, well, then it's just a great playlist to listen to.
You mentioned we. Who is we? And can you tell us a little bit about the history of Just Jams, where it came from? Oh. I mean, the idea is quite simple, but the way that you've developed it is not as simple. Where did it come from and how did it develop?
Well, we is me, Chris, who runs the social media side, and then my brother, Brian, who runs all the technical stuff. He built the website, he built the app, and he came up with all the logic behind it. This was something that we kind of started in early 2000. There was a 1997 Just Jams compilation that we had downloaded years and years ago. And we were like, why don't we just do that with some of the other like more recent years, and started doing that, and then slowly started going back through 1.0 and adding all of those years together. Not necessarily with the intention of putting it into a website. Initially, it was just for our own listening pleasure and making them available for download. And then I said, the best way to do this, I said, if you had a website that could stream this stuff, people would really go for it. They might not want to download it, but they could really go for it if they're streaming it. So we tried it, we put it out, and it's been, pretty nice success for us so far.
Is there a certain time limit or a certain length requirement that you and Brian have that a certain instrumental part has to count as, quote, a jam? Because this is hotly debated among a lot of Phish fans, especially people who are, like I used to be, obsessed with Phish.net and set lists, where it used to say, for example, on April 3rd, 98, the Island Tour, where it would say Roses Are Free, and then a segue, a little arrow that would say Nassau Jam. I mean, where does it start? Where does it end when a jam has to be included or should be included on the site? I'm thinking in 2019, which was the era of the micro jam. It must have driven you guys crazy.
we don't have guidelines that it has to be this long or this short or anything like that for it to be a jam. And at this point, it's really just repetition and familiarity with it. I can just look at the track timings and the set list and be like, oh, okay. Oh, that I don't need to include that down with disease. That was an early first setter that's only 9 minutes. I don't need to include that. But holy cow, that camel walk had a little bit extra. So yeah, I'm definitely going to cut that up or something.
I love what you said a little bit earlier. This never occurred to me while using your site that you start in 1993, because everyone refers to Phish as a jam band, and the low-hanging fruit joke from non-Phish fans is, oh, they play one song for 40 minutes. You know, what kind of bullshit is that? But when you go back, and we've done this on this podcast with some guests who have chosen earlier Phish songs from or earlier Phish shows from before 1993, they were not a jam band. You could listen to 12 or 14 songs in one set in 1991 or 1992. Are there any jams that you could think of that would predate 1993? Or if one showed up, would you include it?
Yeah, there are definitely a few. What we try to do is we try to go comprehensively through a year. And that's kind of why we've started at 93, is because 93 was kind of the first consistent year where you could have open jamming. You know, in 92, yeah, you could definitely find some jams throughout 92 and stuff like that, but it would be a little bit more hit and miss. You could go like a week and a half of shows and not really have anything that would qualify. So that's kind of why we started with 93. Before that, it was there was jamming, but it was more like structured jamming, like solos more than like group band jamming.
I'm thinking about Foam, for example, in 1992.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great example of one that would be kind of hard for us to cut up as well, simply because of the way that the song is kind of laid out with jams throughout the middle and stuff like that. So.
And what do you do for certain songs where a version of Tweezer, where there might be singing in the middle of it, but it's definitely Tweezer and they go back to the jam here and there? I don't know if Tweezer is the best version, because once they're done with the vocals, they're usually completely done. But there are versions of it, like I'm thinking October 30th, 2010, when they did the Led Zeppelin segues, where it's an awesome jam right in the middle, but all of a sudden they're singing Whole Lot of Love or Heartbreaker. Do you copy and paste and just cut around like surgery? Do you cut around the vocals and then put the musical continuation in later? How do you deal with Phish's goofiness when it comes to that?
Well, Tweezer fests are really the best example of this. Ones from the MPP in 14 or the one earlier this year, where they'll play Tweezer, there'll be a jam, and then they kind of go into a song, and then out of that jam, they'll just kind of throw a little bit of Tweezer jamming on there. Some of those are kind of hard and don't really work well for our purposes. But sometimes, like this year, the Tweezer Fest from this year was from, what show was that? The Man?
I was out of town for almost the whole first half of Phish's tour, so I am not the authority this year.
When they would go back into the jam, there was actually a meaty enough part of the jam. Like if it's just 90 seconds, then I'm probably not going to include it. But if it's 4 or 5 minutes, then I pasted those together for this Tweezer on this one.
Do you get statistics or certain sort of data about which playlists are most listened to, least listened to over a 90-day period or 30-day period? Does that come through in your website hosting?
Yes, in the analytics, I can look back. I've actually, a couple months ago, it was just our 7-year anniversary of the website going live. And so I went back and was like, over the entire 7 years, what has been the most popular playlist? What has been the most popular track that was played? The most popular versions of each song. And so I can kind of go through and pull all of that together. And I think I've done that a couple times. I'll do that sporadically just to be like, all right, well, this is all the stats from this year. like everyone started listening from 2022. This is the statistics for that. So we have that capability to look up things and look up the most popular playlist. The Dark Evil playlist is the most popular playlist, almost double over any other playlist.
Huh, I wonder why that is. I'm not shitting on it. I mean, one of my favorite jams ever is from December 30th, 2012. The Carini from that show is like the darkest Phish jam I've ever heard live, aside from pretty much everything in 2004. But the most cohesive dark jam I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I wonder why the Phish crowd slants that way. I don't know. That's for another conversation. But to wrap this up, Chris, where and how can fans access Just Jams? You have the floor. Brag about it and tell us where to find it.
Yeah, no problem. It's the website is just www.phishjustjams.com. And then we also have a free iOS app in the App Store. Either one of those, you can access Phish Just Jams at any time. And whether you need us for 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 days, we've got enough jams to keep you occupied.
Well, Chris, we know what you and your brother Brian do for the Phish community, but let's hear more about you as a person with the lightning round.
Attendance bias lightning round.
Chris, what was your first Phish show and what do you remember most about it?
First Phish show was 10/24/95 in Madison, Wisconsin. Also went the next night in 10/25 in St. Paul. But the first night, the main thing I remember is that show had the mother of all antelopes. That antelope is really the whole second set is very, very, very good. But the antelope is the one that's well known from that show. So that's probably the thing that I remember the most, outside of just being overwhelmed at the crowd and everything that was there.
What was there? What do you remember about the crowd?
Well, I had been listening for probably a year or two and had been trading tapes. So like I knew song wise and like musically I was fairly prepared, but I hadn't been to anything like that, like a Phish show. So just getting to the lot and just kind of taking it all in as I think it was probably 19 or 20. Was just a lot to take in and just kind of, soak up.
What was your most recent show and what did you think of it?
Well, as of now, my most recent show was Dick's 2019. But give me another week and a half and my most recent shows will be Dick's 2022.
Oh, that's exciting. By the time this airs, you will have already gone to it.
Yes. So I guess in that case, my most recent show is happening in a week.
well put. Well, that kind of feeds right into the next lightning round question because it deals with time travel. If you had a time machine and you could travel back to any Phish moment, whether on stage or you could be a fly on the wall for a conversation, for example, where and when would you go?
I thought about this a bunch. I think what I settled on is Halloween 1994. And the reason is, the first Halloween, first cover album, but no one really knew what exactly they were going to be doing. No one knew what album they were going to do. No one even really knew for sure they were going to do an album. They were just donning a musical costume. So, like, nobody had any idea what they were going into. And there was a 3-set show that I believe went to like 2 or something in the morning.
Yeah, I think I've heard rumors of it going even later, like 3 or 3:30, because I know it ends with the Squirming Coil, right? And I remember reading, I think it was in the Farmer's Almanac, one of those like fan books, that people were walking out. It was almost like a lullaby of Page playing the piano, playing people to sleep because it was so late.
I mean, I'm a Beatles fan as well, so that would have been nice as well. I would have at least recognized it and stuff. But the sense of not knowing what's coming. They started with the Dark Side of the Moon fake out, before they went into the Ed Sullivan and then right into the Beatles. That had to have been a moment that like nobody knew what was coming. No one knew what was. They were all experiencing it together, just trying to figure it out at the same time.
And there was no Phish bill yet. That came the
Yes.
next year with Quadrophenia.
Yep, no Phish bill.
What is your favorite post-show snack?
I'd probably say some simple and easy, like a grilled cheese in the lot or something. Either that or just some type of little crackers or snacks, something like that I might bring and leave in the car.
More of a personal question for the lightning round that I don't know if I could ask a lot of other people this. If your website or app completely malfunctioned, right? Crossing my fingers for those of you at home that it never happens. But if in this world your website or app malfunctioned and you were stuck with just 1 year's worth of jams, which year would you want it to be and why?
I would go with 1997. And the reasons are a couple. Obviously, 97 is a high point year. Just as far as Phish Just Jams goes, there's 276 individual jam tracks for that year. That's the most of any year. And you actually, people do, tend to think of it as just the funk year, but there's a lot of different variety in there. Like if I went with, say, just 95, then I don't have the option of, funk and dance parties and stuff like that. Whereas I do have that in 97. A lot of that's funk and dance parties, but there's also the psych and, the crazy guitar shredding as well. So kind of 97 to me kind of has everything that you would want to have in one, if I only had 1 year.
And finally, Chris, what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show, whether it's inside the show or outside of it?
All right. Well, the weirdest thing I've ever seen at a Phish show actually happens during this show. So I'm not going to spoil that part, but I do have a backup.
All right, good. Let's hear the backup.
The weirdest thing. The second weirdest thing I've ever seen at a Phish show was at Oak Mountain in Alabama in 2014. During the second set, they're playing Ghost, and it's not really a lawn there, but I'm in that type of area of the amphitheater. And I look down to my right, and there's a guy, a big guy, who is standing there eating a turkey leg. And I mean like a Renaissance fair type turkey leg, like as big as your forearm type of turkey leg. And he is eating it and swinging it around and like dancing with it and like using it for like to hit the beat on Ghost. And I am sitting there watching it going, there's no way that guy really has a turkey leg here, is there? But apparently they sold them there at the show.
I want to find him and have him on the show.
I can't imagine eating a turkey leg during a show.
When was this show played?
Phish's fall 1996 tour totaled 35 shows. It began in October, all the way in Lake Placid, so upstate New York, stayed on the East Coast all the way through the beginning of November, so half a month on the East Coast. They played 2 midweek shows at MSG, I remember, because I wanted to go, but I had just turned 14 and I was not allowed. The tour moved and hovered in the Southeast and then the Midwest for about 2 weeks, including today's show in Omaha. Then it migrated toward the Pacific Northwest at the end of the month. They played in Spokane, Washington. They went down the West Coast, and it ended with a famous show that was covered on this podcast on December 6th, 1996 at the Aladdin. And when I began this podcast about 2 years ago, I was of the mind that 1996 was, quote, an in-between year. Like it didn't have its own distinct personality. It didn't live up to the crazy, insane rock and roll of 1995, or like we just talked about, the cow funk / machine gun rock dance party of 1997. And whenever I said or posted this opinion on social media, I would get like a 50-50 reaction of people either agreeing with me or a simple response of LOL. 1996 as an in-between year, like I'm the idiot. But after reviewing a handful of shows in 96, I've come around to the people who dismiss or, that laugh at me. I'm with them. 1996 was an incredible year for Phish.
Yeah. The way I look at it is kind of like, let's say you follow a sports team and they win the championship in 95 and in 97. And in 1996, they went out in the first round of the playoffs. All right. All the pieces are still there. They just might not have had the exact chemistry or whatever to put it together to take it to the very top that year. Doesn't mean that it's a bad year overall. Just doesn't have as many highlights and full shows perhaps as some of the other years. But 96, if you skip out on 96, you're doing yourself a disservice.
I agree with you 1,000%. And I'm a Yankees fan, by the way. So a lot of people who are, I've heard it all. But a lot of my contemporaries in terms of age, right? I'm about to turn 40 years old. So I was in high school in the mid to late 90s when it was the dynasty with the Yankees and Jeter and Eddie Pettit and all that, where it became kind of brainwashed that fans of my age it's a World Series or nothing. That the season is a waste if the Yankees don't win the World Series. And when I was like 16, I bought into it. But since I've matured and learned more about sports and become in contact with people all over the country, I realized how stupid that is. Because if you do that, you limit yourself, kind of like what you were saying, to the little joys that can come out of a really good and successful season, even if it doesn't end with a World Series trophy. Looking at 96, Phish was adjusting to their newfound popularity as arena rock headliners. They discovered 2001 as a jam vehicle. Before that, you would know as better as anyone, it was mostly 3 or 4 minutes, usually as a set opener. There's Remain in Light on Halloween, by the way, the Clifford Ball, they built on their sense of humor. That didn't go away with the M set. And we'll talk about more of their sense of humor about today's set. And any number of musical highlights, the Clifford Ball, they accomplished so much, and yet people, and I used to be one, just kind of gloss over it. So I want to ask, who were you in the fall of 96 and what led you to Omaha, Nebraska?
Well, in fall of 96, I was enrolled in classes in University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. I would not necessarily be able to give you attendance bias on any of those classes from that particular semester. But that's kind of where and who I was then. In 96 was an odd year for me in seeing Phish. It was my second year. I saw 3 shows that year. I was living in Northwest Wisconsin, and the 3 shows that I saw were Jazz Fest in New Orleans, 10/18 in Pittsburgh, and 11/16 in Omaha. I did not see the show at Alpine, which was very close to me, and I didn't see the show at St. Paul in the fall. That was also very close to me. Just odd the way that things worked out. That's kind of where I was, and that's kind of why I have attendance bias towards this show.
Well, what led you to Omaha? Because I'm not so great with American geography in terms of distance, but I would have to imagine that Omaha is quite a distance from Wisconsin. Am I wrong?
It was a 10+ hour drive.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I had other friends who were going, and I was just like, I'm going to hop in. I don't know why I'm going to see this particular show. I don't know why I'm traveling 10 hours just to see the one show and not like 2, 3, or 4. But the decisions that you make as a 20-year-old sometimes are not always the brightest.
Amen to that. And that could be its own podcast as well, by the way. Call it I Was 20.
Yes. And survived.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance bias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of attendance bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode. We mentioned just once or twice leading up to this point that the show date is November 16th, 96, but our breakdown, this part of the podcast where we go song by song, we're only going to talk about the second set. Can you give us a reason why we're focusing on this and why or summarize at least the first set?
Well, the first set is fairly non-eventful. There's not really anything that breaks out of like what you would anticipate for that particular version of the songs that they played. There were some nice things. And I caught my first Old Home Place. There's a nice Bowie, first Frankenstein for me. There was a Lawn Boy. So I mean, there were good songs. But it just wasn't anything that was kind of stand out. And frankly, it's one of the reasons why I think people can tend to overlook 96 is that there maybe aren't complete shows. They would look at this first set and be like, I'm not going to bother with this show. So that's kind of why.
And to your earlier point about 1996 as a whole, if you skipped over this whole show just on a look or a listen of the first set, you are doing yourself a disservice. So let's get right into it. Set 2 opens with LaGrange. And I would guess that this is probably one of the most sought after Phish covers for the band to bring back. I wish they would. You know, this always seemed to be the sort of thing where old-time fans, older than me at least, would say, oh, they got to bring back LaGrange, the ZZ Top cover. What was it like to open with this for you and the audience?
It was completely unexpected. I think at set break, my friends had been like, all right, let's, who can call the cover for the encore? But then they came out and they ended that right away by just absolutely blistering version of LaGrange. I mean, once it gets going, you know, I look at the video on YouTube and it's just 4 heads bobbing in unison while Trey just lights his guitar on fire.
And it should be noted, to your point just now, this whole show is available on YouTube. You could see it. Yeah. You could see it all happen. I did a little bit of research on the statistics for LaGrange. It's one of the oldest Phish covers. It debuted on August 9th, 1987 at Nectar's. So not only that, but as of today's recording, our conversation right now, it was last played on July 8th, 2012 at SPAC. And that performance was the first and only time that it's been played since 1.0.
Yeah, that's pretty surprising because it's a fun, ripping cover
and a familiar one. Everyone knows this song.
Yeah, it just gives Trey plenty of time to just get a guitar workout in and and just shred it.
And it speaks just a little bit to that transition between 96 and 97. It's a little bit less freak out on a guitar solo song and more hold back a bit and let the whole band shine as a unit, even though there's plenty of guitar solo freak out.
Yeah, no, that definitely is the case because the entire band is just raging. It is not something where Trey is playing a solo over, three other guys who just happen to be playing the same thing, and it could be any three guys. No, they are absolutely just raging. The entire band is synced in. And it's kind of funny because, the first set was, kind of uneven and up and down. But here they just seem completely locked in, and they're a whole unit.
And they're locked in, especially in the next song, which for me, when I listened to the show or the set, this was my highlight, just listening. They played Runaway Jim, which is perfect. They nail that soft, loud dynamic where I'm going to forgive everyone who's listening for me singing it. But when they do they get real, real soft. And then Trey comes back into sorry, everyone.
Yeah,
but
no, that was fantastic.
It's like a magic trick.
Yeah, it was a terrific version. It's really what you are hoping for whenever they start Runaway Jim. That's what you want, is one of those where they just break it down so quietly, and then all of a sudden it's just right back through the roof, and the energy, it's coming, and you're just waiting for it to just explode.
And it doesn't explode. It actually becomes very atmospheric.
It does. It gets kind of out there. It is not a typical Runaway Jim jam in that it gets kind of out there and weird fairly early on. It doesn't take like the normal standard approach for a Runaway Jim. It pretty much goes for it right from the get-go.
would imagine this is probably on your website.
Yes, yes. The gym and there's only 2 tracks, I believe, from this show, but the gym is definitely one of them.
And that atmospheric, dark kind of feedback leads right into the next. I won't even call it the next song. Is like the next suite, I guess, or the next segment, which on Phish.in, which is where I listened to it, is the Vibration of Life into Kung into Catapult, which is a very mid-90s sequence. I mean, Trey even asks Fishman to stop playing the drums so they could do this whole weird spoken word piece that lasts about 21 minutes. This is not a small section of the set.
Yeah, I think Trey I think the gym jam kind of breaks down a little bit. I don't know if it's intentional or if it's just kind of what happened, but then you could see, like when you're watching the video, you can see kind of Trey kind of signal to Mike and Paige, and they kind of stop. But Phish doesn't really see it, and he's still kind of just lightly going along. And that's when Trey's like, "Yeah, if Phish will cut it off on the drums here a little bit, just cut it off, Phish." And then he goes into the explanation for the vibrational life,
which is funny because they've been playing this since at least 94. And Trey does the same exact narration every single time where he talks about 7 beats per minute. And, we're trying to get this to you. This was written by God. Like that sort of thing has been heard so many times before. I wonder if it's just part of the song, such as it is, or the poem, the narration, or if maybe there's this idea, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that they're in Omaha, which being from New York City, I think of as the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, it is kind of middle of nowhere. I view his explanation of the vibrational life, like you said, kind of every time he does it, to just kind of explain what the heck is going on, because otherwise there's going to be like more than half of the crowd is just going to be like, what is going on? There's just like one consistent like beat that is, it just kind of defies explanation if you don't really know what it is that's coming.
What we're going to do here is we're going to give you the vibration of life. And what it is that the theoretical universal glue is a vibration that beats at about 7.5 beats per second. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to give you this vibration that beats at 7.5 beats per second, and it's going to tune you up with the energy of the universe and fill you with incredible energy. You're going to feel it in your ass and in your solar plexus. Exactly, yes. You're going to feel it everywhere. So get ready to feel it. This is the vibration of life. This was written by God.
One of my notes for Vibration of Life, I wrote this down, says, it doesn't do much on a recording. What is it like when you're there? And then when you told me that the show is available on YouTube, I went back and watched it, and wow, what a different experience. This is what attendance bias means. Because if you're just listening to this, this is bullshit. Like, this is garbage. It's boring. But when you see it happening and the crowd's reaction and Trey's body language, it's an experience. And it goes in immediately it segues into Kung. And I love that this has always stayed in the rotation. It's, I don't know, there's just something about this that works perfectly. These two spoken word against weird background noise pieces that fit together.
Yeah, this was a special treat for me because, like I said, I was well versed in live Phish shows before I went to my first show. So when I got a vibrational life and a Kung, during this show, it was just turning to my friends and just being like, I'm in just utter shock. I don't really know how to process this. I never would have said going into a show, hey, what are you looking to hear? Oh, I definitely want to hear a Kung.
Right.
You're never going to say that because, I mean, you may as well say, hey, I want to hear a Dark Star. They're not going to play it. And then this particular version is just demonic.
Yeah.
It is just creepy, and they're screaming the lyrics, if you will, and Fishman's standing up and screaming his lines, and yeah, it was a sight to behold.
My friend Craig, or my friend Elliot, really, a bunch of us went to in 2004 to the show in Brooklyn, one of the two shows in Brooklyn. And it was raining, it was nasty, it was a gross day. And they decided, I did not, but they decided to eat a whole bunch of mushrooms. And one of my friends had never seen Phish. She heard of them, but had never seen. And they went right into the middle of Kung. And that was right when everything was starting to take effect. And when they're screaming, stand up from the hills. And I just remember seeing her giant eyes looking around, just saying, what the fuck is going on right now?
Well, definitely. I mean, Trey is absolutely egging the crowd on with this. And it's always so funny when you're actually seeing it, because, he's imploring everybody, stand up.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's anybody who's sitting at the Phish show. So like everyone's already standing up and screaming. And so when they yell, stand up, really people just scream more and raise their arms. That's basically all they can do. They're already standing.
Yeah, and this venue was general admission. Trey makes reference to that. So everyone is standing up no matter where they are anyway.
Yep. Yeah, it was he definitely commented on that, loving the general admission shows where people can just kind of go wherever they want. That was it wasn't as common during those fall tour type of shows to have a general admission. You could have a floor and seats generally, but there weren't necessarily a straight general admission show.
And they close up this whole segment with a third spoken word piece of Catapult, and Trey goes on his percussion kit. I want to ask you, as someone who was there at the time, I know that people were kind of split in opinion on this. What were your thoughts on his percussion kit?
I like the percussion kit when it's used like this, where it's not in a standard part of a jam. Like during this time, Free was, he would always go to the percussion kit, play kind of the feedback on his guitar, and that was predictable and what you would expect. I'm always kind of looking for the unpredictable, and Trey going to the percussion kit in the middle of this weird spoken word section really kind of spoke to me, and I liked it. I suppose kind of just as much in a cool, I'm able to say that I saw Trey going to his percussion kit and this happening. This is something that, like you said, when you're just listening to it, it doesn't really do a whole lot for you. When you're there or see the video, now all of a sudden you could see Mike going to the front of the stage and bellowing out each line of Catapult as he faces different directions each time for each thing. It was the type of Phish weirdness that you're always looking for.
After that whole segment, that weirdo segment, they kick things into higher gear, which I think is the right move in terms of flow, in terms of energy. With Axilla, I wrote, what a kick. This version.
Well, I was going to say, but before that, after the Catapult is the weirdest thing I've ever seen at a Phish show.
Oh, go for it.
When, because, they do Vibrational Life, they do Kung, they do Catapult. None of that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen at a Phish show. The weirdest thing I've ever seen was after the end of Catapult, when Mike goes over to his rig and pulls out some type of I don't even know what the heck it is, a veil, a scarf, or something, and he just does some type of, I'm going to use air quotes when I say dance, out in front of the stage. And it was definitely one of those, I have absolutely no idea what is going on, and I could never explain this to someone who's not at a Phish show. That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
This is why it's so wonderful that it's on YouTube, because you don't have to explain it. And I will check it. And those of you listening, you could check the show notes and listen to the fact check. I'll find the timestamp for it. The link will be in the show notes, and I'll give you the timestamp so you can check it out. It looks like someone explained to Mike what dancing is and then showed him an illustration of it, like those sorts of illustrations when you have to develop a patent with like labeled numbered parts and arrows about which direction they go, and then said, okay, now you do it.
He most certainly did not see a video of that. Right, I think you're exactly right. He read it. It was like Chinese instructions, and he was just like, yeah, this makes sense. I think I can do this.
But it is something to see. And I don't think anyone would fault you for saying that is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show. And it only makes sense that it's from Mike Gordon.
Yes, it does. It makes perfect sense.
Well, then they go into the big kick in the pants of Axilla.
Not exactly a breather.
No, well, yeah. And the previous segment wasn't a breather either. It was just kind of like a, I don't know, it was kind of Twin Peaks at a Phish show.
Yes.
But now this is straight ahead rock and roll.
Yes. This is, like you said, this is a kick in the pants. Unexpected again. And this is probably one of my preferred type of versions, because it is an Axilla Part 1 for the vocals, but the Axilla Part 2 ending. Usually it's one or the other, but I don't know how many times they've done it like this. It's pretty unique.
It is, and it's the first vocal appearance of a name that every fan is now familiar with. They start shouting Lee Fordham's name.
Correct. Yeah, they start doing that in the outro section. They start by name checking Kuroda, and then I think they mention a few other people. But then when the first person mentions Lee Fordham, they go full bore into that. Fishman just starts screaming Lee Fordham.
I did a little bit of research on this, and have you read up on the story about why Lee Fordham's name gets thrown into this show? Because he appears not physically, but his name shows up again throughout the set.
No, I didn't see.
Okay, so this is from Reddit. So take that for what it's worth, with a large grain of salt. But Lee Fordham, this is established that he was a part of the lighting crew. He worked with Chris Kuroda, and before this tour, the band and a couple crew members were on a vacation. I think it was either in Cuba or in Mexico, and they went out on a fishing excursion. And while they were out on the excursion, they found bricks of drugs floating in the ocean. And Lee Fordham wanted them to throw them back because he was nervous about going over different through the borders.
Understandable.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's what Lee Fordham sold me out though, but you could hear Fishman in this scream about a boat trip.
Yes.
So that's what's been pieced together, at least by random fans on Reddit. Can't confirm it, but I like to think it's true.
I think he does. Fishman does mention Cuba during the intro to the next song that's coming along, so.
which is Harry Hood, which was a surprisingly smooth transition. I wrote that while I was listening, but when I watched it, you could see Trey is kind of running point. He's the quarterback here, pointing at everyone and screaming the name of the next song. But if you're just listening, it's flawless anyway.
Yeah, it is exactly like that. When you're watching it, you can kind of see him throughout that whole segment. He's kind of calling out to different members of the band, like, "Hey, what's coming up next here? Do catapults and stuff." And then you could see him go over and call it out to Mike and to Phish. And you're right; they just drop right into perfectly into Harry Hood.
And they keep it going with Lee Fordham, where do you go? Sorry again to all the listeners that I'm singing more than ever in this episode, but that's a joke to the beginning of this Harry Hood, but the jam is very beautiful.
Oh, right after they start the Lee Fordham thing, right before they go into the next little segment, it's before the Mr. Minor segment. But when you're watching the video, you can see Trey kind of look over to Paige right before they drop into the little beautiful part, and just kind of a quick little shrug of the shoulders, and it's just kind of like, "Hey, you want to go tear this up? Yeah, let's go destroy this." And then they just smoothly just roll right into it, and it's just gorgeous.
I would have to imagine that this is the other jam from this show that's on your website.
It is. It is.
It
most certainly is.
And we'd be remiss to not mention that during this jam of Harry Hood, we all know the notes as they get to the end of the jam, where Trey sustains this one note for however long it is. For this version, it must be close to what, 3 minutes?
It's just under 3 minutes. I've timed it a number of times, and it's like just under 3 minutes that he's holding a single note. When you're watching that video, I don't know what he's doing with his hands. He's like trying to acting like he's drawing stuff out of the guitar, raising the fans up. It's pretty crazy.
I thought when I was watching, I'm so glad you mentioned this. I really am, because when I watched it, it looks like while he's holding the note with his left hand, almost like he's bending it. And it looks like with his right hand, he's almost scooping up the sound, like in front of the guitar, like he's miming that there's like an ocean of sound in front of the guitar, and he's like scooping up the water and splashing it onto the crowd. Like he's like, there's more. And he's the meantime, he's just letting the note sustain, and it's driving the crowd nuts.
And the band is absolutely raging underneath him. Page in particular. Page is just pounding away. It's like they aren't even cognizant of the fact that he's still holding that same note. They're treating it just like it's any other hood, and they are just banging away.
It's beautiful. It rounds the corner at about 12 and a half minutes, and it leads to this big, powerful ending. I was speechless both times when I listened and again when I watched it. You really made a great choice today.
Yeah, it is truly an amazing hood. It's kind of my ideal hood that doesn't kind of like that stays within the framework of the jam. It has that peak is just so beautiful. Holding the note for the 3 minutes. That's how many times has that happened? Not very often.
Yeah. And right when Harry Hood ends, literally on the last note, is the first note of Susie Greenberg, which is a great call, because it's almost as if Harry Hood was the tension and Susie Greenberg is the release. We talk about tension and release in their jams. This is tension and release in their setlist choices.
You could smell that Susie coming a mile away. There was no way we were going to get out of that arena without a chance to reference what was being played earlier in the set.
She's always afraid that she's not sure what she's worth. And she's not of this earth. The woman walks the streets like she's the queen of the town. Doesn't talk very much, she's very profound. Little Susie Greenberg, always playing the game. Today I bet she's probably forgotten my name.
Leave Ford forgot my name once. I was very hot!
I love when they do that. That's part of what made me fall in love with Phish.
Yeah, but when they come in and they hit there's the Lagrange reference, and then there's the Axilla reference, and those are absolutely my favorite versions of Susie.
And they closed the whole set with Amazing Grace, which I thought was an odd choice. They didn't do as many a cappella songs at this point in their career. They were never fully gone. But by the end of 1996, it wasn't as common as say it was in 1994 or even the beginning of 1995. But I don't know. I guess you can't complain about one more song.
The a cappella numbers at the close of a set, they're never taking away any time that could have been used for jams. Like if that had happened in the middle of the set, you'd raise an eyebrow at that. That's kind of weird. But when it comes at the end of a set, I think it's a nice little capper and a nice little goodbye before the encore comes.
And they go off the stage and they come back almost immediately. The encore break is maybe a minute. It's really, really short, at least according to the video. And I think the reason for that is they must have rehearsed this song well before the gig started. They come on and play We're an American Band by Grand Funk Railroad. And this is the first time it's ever played, one of two. And they clearly learned and played it for the line of Four Young Chiquitas in Omaha. Trey even points to the crowd when he sings it. Great choice. And they were still in the stage where they would learn a full song just for one line to treat the crowd. They're back to that nowadays, but there was a long time where they wouldn't do something like that, where they wouldn't be as self-referential.
Yeah, that's spot on, and it's a great performance. You know, I say just pretend that Kid Rock doesn't exist, and then it's the only time that was ever played. That's probably a good rule of thumb, anyway. But you know, as far as I'm concerned, the set really has basically every aspect of the Phish experience. You know, it's got the ripping classic rock cover. It's got the Runaway Jim that gets kind of psychedelic and out there. It's got the bizarre narration that you're never going to see at any other type of rock show. Whatever the hell you call Axilla. I mean, that's not really that is not your typical song, and frankly, it doesn't sound like any other Phish song at all. You know, then you got the all-time Bliss Peak, followed by the Susie, an acapella, and then the geographically referenced first time cover. That's all the elements of a Phish show. You might not want them all at the same show and at every show to be like that, but that's pretty much all that you're looking for in a Phish show, all condensed in basically one set with no breathers.
In Omaha, Nebraska, no less.
Yeah, and I don't remember what day of the week it was. I do not believe it was a Saturday, but I could be wrong.
Well, Chris from Phish Just Jams, thank you a million times over for being on the show today. First of all, November 16th, 1996, set 2 at the Civic Auditorium in Omaha, but a greater, wider thanks for what you and your brother do and what you have provided and serviced to the Phish community with your site. I just want to give you one more opportunity to give yourself a shout out. What is Phish Just Jams and where can it be found and enjoyed?
Yeah, again, it's at just phishjustjams.com. We also have a free iOS app. And then you can follow our Twitter accounts. We're on Facebook as well. And on Twitter, I just kind of tweet out different playlists throughout the day. Obviously, you can visit the site and create your own playlist every single time you visit. These are just simple ones that you can click on and get right to. Yeah, all of that's available at phishjustjams.com.
And that's it for today's conversation with Chris from Just Jams. It's been 26 years and also with a pretty obscure show at that, so let's double check our facts and figures with the attendance bias fact check.
Attendance bias fact check.
First, when discussing how to differentiate and separate jams from songs in the middle of a Tweezer Fest, Chris brought up the Tweezer-laden set from Merriweather Post on July 27, 2014. That show, and that set in particular, was covered on this podcast with Tim from Wook Plus. Chris then brings up the more recent version, but could not quite remember where or when it was played. It was at the Mann Music Center on July 19, 2022. When talking about the shows he saw in 1996, Chris mentions Jazz Fest. That show was on April 26, 1996 in New Orleans. Phish played a nearly 2-hour set at the legendary festival. When listening to this set, I was surprised that Trey gave a whole explanation of the vibration of life, considering that they had been playing the song since at least 1994. Upon checking, the vibration of life debuted on November 23, 1992 in Binghamton, and has only been played 22 times in Phish's history. The last live performance was just a few days after today's show, and it was on November 19, 1996 at the Kansas City Municipal Auditorium. The Brooklyn show, where my friend had a freakout during Kung, was played on June 17, 2004, and it has since been released officially on DVD. And if you want to see the weirdest thing that Chris has ever seen at a Phish show, Mike doing what could charitably be called a dance with a scarf, check out the link in today's show notes and fast forward to 29 minutes and 55 seconds. Enjoy. And finally, at the end of the conversation, Chris says that he didn't remember which day of the week today's show was played on. It was a Saturday. And that's it for today's episode of Attendance Bias. Thank you so much for listening. And one last reminder, if you want to support the show in any way in addition to listening, you can follow Attendance Bias on social media, and you can donate financially anything you can spare at www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias. Thank you again so much for listening. Thank you to Phish.net, thank you to Phish.in, and thank you to Chris from Phish Just Jams, and I'll see you next week on Attendance Bias.